Let's begin looking at the book of Jonah in the Masoretic text. Here we're looking at BHS, or Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. Note the name of the book in Latin here is Jonah, and here's the Hebrew, Jonah, and it's given without vowel points. Here's the title of the book, Jonah in Hebrew. Let's talk a little bit about the Masoretic accents. I've listed 6 of them up here at the top left-hand corner. We have discussed all of these in the textbook. Some are more important than others. Number 1, we have the pair, Sof Pasuk and Saluk. We have an example of that down here with number 1. And the Sof Pasuk is this double diamond, kind of like a colon made out of diamonds, that comes at the end of a verse. And the Saluk is paired up with it. It looks like a metag. It's this little vertical stroke, and it always comes on the accented syllable of the last word before the Sof Pasuk. So these two go together. So that is our first accent. The second important accent here is the atnach, up here number 2 in the top left. You come down here to our circled number 2 in the second line, and notice the atnach is this little carrot looking thing underneath the word, and it appears to the left of the vowel of the syllable that it's accenting. So here we have aleha, aleha. And so the atnach, as far as the sentence goes, is a full stop, like a semicolon, sometimes maybe even a period, and it appears under the accented syllable of the word. So we have aleha, and this is the end of a thought here. Perhaps a semicolon, perhaps even a comma. It depends on how long the sentence is and what's going on in the context, but the atnach is a pause. Our next accent is number 3 up here, our zakef katon, and that looks like a little colon on top of the word. We have an example here under number 3 in the top line, right here above the yod he vav he, pronounced Adonai by the Jews, and we have a zakef katon here. This also marks the accented syllable, and it is a pause, but a lesser pause than the atnach. Very common in the book of Jonah. So we see it here for Adonai. Actually, the accent here is marked as if we had written Adonai. We have the accent on the last syllable, but it's marked as if we were pronouncing Adonai rather than Yahweh. Number 4 over here is the zakef gadol. It's listed in the textbook, but it's actually very unimportant in the book of Jonah. It only appears twice that I can find. Over in Jonah 4, 8, and 9, I gave an example here. It's vayomer both times. It also marks the accent. It appears above the word, and it is just, it's like the zakef katon, only it has a little vertical stroke to the left of it. We will not need to pay a lot of attention to the zakef gadol in this book. A couple of lesser signs here. One is the tifcha. I've marked one over here on the top line, number 5, and it appears under the word, and it's this little diagonal stroke going from top left to bottom right. This also marks the accented syllable, and it's somewhat of a pause, although not as much as the others we've talked about. And then finally, number 6 is the revia, and the revia is a diamond-shaped symbol above the word. We have an example over here on the 4th line on the right-hand side, number 6 here, and it also marks the accented syllable, the tone syllable. So we have Tarshish, Tarshish. So those are the main ones we need to worry about. The rest of the accents are helpful. So for example, if we see, for instance, under Jonah here, we see an accent here, a far lesser pause, but it does give us the accent. Anytime we see one of these marks, with one exception that I'll mention in a minute, we see one of these marks above or below the actual word, it will mark the tone syllable. And so we have Jonah. Down here we have alata in the second line here, alata. And so these are marking tone syllables. Here's an example of one, the third line here, vayered, vayered. Now occasionally we have symbols that come after the word. Example is the very first one, the very first word in chapter 1 verse 1. This is actually coming after the word, and so it does not mark a tone syllable. We have to look elsewhere for information on the tone syllable. We call these either postpositive, or occasionally we have accents that come before the word and we call those prepositive. The postpositive and the prepositive do not mark accents. Anything else that we see, pretty much over a word or under a word, with one exception that I'll tell you in a second, gives us the accented syllable. So they're very helpful, even though they don't give us a whole lot of help in terms of dividing up the sentence. The ones that we have up here on the top here, Sof Pasuk Saluk, Atnach, Zakef Katon, those are really the main ones that we need to pay attention to in terms of dividing up sentences and clauses. The lesser ones, Zakef Gadol, Tifa, Revia, we've also mentioned the Sagolta, which you see down here at the end of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 6th line. The Sagolta is postpositive. It does not give you a accent, and it's not super helpful in terms of pauses, although the textbook does cover it. So the main ones to look at are Sof Pasuk and Saluk, number 1, Atnach, number 2, Zakef Katon, number 3, and the other ones that appear under or over words are helpful for giving us accents. The one exception here is when you see a little circle. Now sometimes circles appear above a word, sometimes they appear, for instance, above a word here, sometimes they appear like in line 3 here, between words. But these circles are pointing us to Masoretic notes over on the left hand or right hand margin. They don't represent anything having to do with pauses in the words or with syllables of words. They're representing something completely different, and we don't need to worry about those for right now. So that's enough on the Masoretic accents. Mainly we need to pay attention to the ones that are going to help us in terms of pauses, and then the other ones that appear over or under words will help us in terms of the accented syllables.